Hi everyone, this is Vivek Shrivastava. Welcome to my channel. And today we have a very special guest episode. We have Mr. Rick Carroll with us, all the way from Santa Monica, California. Rick is a serial entrepreneur and he's had a very successful startup in the past, which was How To TV. And he's currently the founder of Firestop. So thank you very much for joining us, Rick. I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting and informative session with you today. How are you doing? How's things?
Good. Busy. Lots of things cooking, and the world alone keeps us busy with what's going on everywhere.
That's certainly true. Yeah.
You know, it's a wild world, but I admire what you're doing with your series of podcasts, getting together leaders from around the world, as I understand it. General focus on entrepreneurs. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
I'll just give you a quick sort of a précis of my CV. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut. And Greenwich, Connecticut has a reputation well earned for being a wealthy enclave of the sort of New York executive power establishment. They work in the city and they live in Greenwich. And many of them use the train to make that 45-minute, 1-hour commute to Grand Central every day. So that's where I grew up, and I went to private boarding schools of the English variety, where you'd have a headmaster, and then you come in as a lower former, and then you'd move your way up. So I did that both for grammar school as well as high school, and we refer to that as prep school. Mm-hmm. So, particularly good training for getting along with other guys. You better get along or you're going to be fighting all the time. So I did a fair amount of that. But that whole environment, that whole society, it's like a big cocoon. You're protected, you're educated, you're fed, you're given all kinds of enrichment and travel and things that kids have who are very fortunate. And I'm so grateful that I had that upbringing. Part of that upbringing was meeting all kinds of interesting corporate people and many, many self-made men who would at one time or another be invited to a party at our home. And I just loved it because I could sit and basically pick their brain. And they loved it because people like to talk about themselves, general. So I did a lot of that as a kid, and I realized that very young, you develop that desire to make money on your own, with your own idea, hiring your own people, and not necessarily having to follow somebody else's idea.
When was this? You say it was very young. Was it in your teens that you decided?
Well, I wanted to tell you, I first breakaway out of Greenwich was back at that time. It was fashionable to give kids a year off before they went to school. Before they went to university. So I decided I was going to take a year off working on a tramp steamer which is a relatively light 4,500 ton bulk cargo freighter that went between New Orleans and then small ports in Guatemala, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Mexico. We'd go into Belize. But I mean, it was crazy because here's a kid who is used to wearing a seersucker jacket and a blue blazer and that sort of thing. All of a sudden exposed to people don't even wear shirts. Right. There are chickens running around on the streets, and the streets are dirt, and the roofs are made of thatch, that are coming from the palm trees. It was like a kid in a candy store with tons of these young, beautiful women. So
I'm sure you're being a rich American, only helped.
Oh yeah. I was introduced to all of the various diseases you can pick up from from those kind of girls. But right. When I got home, they took care of all of that. But so that was my first realization that, wow, look at what's out here. And it was, I actually missed the boat, so I didn't get to have my whole year. I got about 6 months, and then I was shacked up with two twins when I heard the horn of the boat as it was leaving at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I was supposed to be on it. So,
well, that's an acceptable excuse. Twins.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's a guy to do?
What's a guy to do?
But seriously, Rick, that's just so good. I would say, having that 1 year off is to do something as opposed to, you're in school with structured learning, then you go to university, which is also structured learning. To take that time off and actually see the real world is so valuable, because in my experience, I didn't get that, right? And it was all school all the way. And then when the real world, I found out I wasn't prepared for it at all in many ways. And, that's just, I love that. And I wish there were more instances of that, particularly in India, which is very, very structured.
Did you go straight to work? No,
I mean, I went straight from high school to college, university, and then after that, straight to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think most people today still do that. But if you can manage your break, it's
because if I could have even had a break between, say, my bachelor's and my master's, I would probably not have done a master's. Because I probably wouldn't have, I would have done something more productive towards entrepreneurship rather than that more structured learning. But yeah, that's so great. And, I always love the American sort of entrepreneurship spirit that they teach you right from when you're a kid. It's very, very typical. You see this in these comics and cartoons, Dennis the Menace or whatever, where the kid has his lemonade stand and he is selling, lemonade for 5 cents or whatever. And it's, but that's good because that gets you in the entrepreneurship spirit, which you don't get if you're in this structured learning mode all the time, which is particularly the case in India. The thought of an 8-year-old, putting up a stand somewhere and selling this from a rich family, or a well-to-do family in India is just unthinkable, unimaginable, But
yeah. Just from the standpoint of caste or position, that you would never do that.
Exactly. And,
and I got some of that as a kid, that you shouldn't really be doing that. But I did it anyway.
That's the rebellious spirit, which I think, again, is a very key for an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And my mom and dad were supportive, too. So. That made all the difference. If they had said no, then that would have been it.
Right. Because you were still a minor.
Yeah, Yeah, as long as you're under their roof, you live by their guidelines. But so anyway, I had that taste of the world, and then came back, finished up school at Fordham University, did half a year at Fairfield, and then moved over to Fordham. And let's see, then I returned back to California. I had done a 3-year stint in the Marines. I forgot to put that in there, but yeah, I did a stint in the Marines.
What prompted you to join the Marines? Like,
Again, I wanted the experience.
okay.
I wanted the experience of their hard training. I wanted to understand what it was about. I understood that it was the best leadership training in the world. And so really, that's what it was about. It was for the experience. I didn't want to make a career of it. They very much wanted me to make a career of it. And in fact, rather soon in my career, they sent me in front of the Admiral's Board to be selected to go to officers candidate school. And they wanted to make me an officer. And the one thing I couldn't give them was a promise of 8 years, because I had no intention of sticking around for 8 years. I wanted to get out there and make some money. And right then, at that time, Vivek, I don't know if you'll remember this, but in the late 70s, we had an oil crisis.
Well, I was just a kid, but everyone's heard of it, the whole OPEC thing.
Yeah, the OPEC thing. Do you remember the lines or any of that?
Oh, no, I was in India. I was a kid in India at that time, so no. And there were no lines here.
Oh, my God. In the United States, the lines were like instantaneous and everywhere. And the idea that somebody could grab us by the balls like that made everybody mad, number one, and educated everybody on the idea that, wow, we've got to do something about this, which prompted, a whole lot of aggressive drilling, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico, a lot of new finds, a lot of new oil discoveries and that sort of stuff, which, ultimately brought us to today's position as the biggest oil producer in the world. But at that time, there was also a growing cry, even then, for the development of renewable technologies, which would include wind, solar, wave, using the power in the waves, geothermal, that sort of stuff. I went to work for a company called Wind Energy Unlimited. It was amazing. It was right in the city that I had previously been in the Marines, in the same city called the Oceanside in California. So right where I got out of the Marines, there's this company that has a big windmill on their roof. You can't miss it. This is a big thing, giant thing up on the roof, up 60 feet in the air. So it wasn't hard to find. And I went to work for the guy, Bill Lutz, and ultimately we became partners. So he owned a third, his wife owned a third, and I owned a third. And we were putting up basically rural, mostly off the grid, setting up people to be independent and off the grid. And sometimes it was just solar, sometimes it was just wind, and most of the times it was a combination of the two with a bank of batteries going through an inverter to power your AC appliances in the house. So you could still have your TV out there. You could still have a washing machine and a refrigerator and a few lights, that kind of stuff. So you could study and everything. So we did a lot of that until, and this is a lesson to all budding entrepreneurs, that every so often something will come out of the blue that you did not expect and will change your business trajectory forever. So I was interviewed by Connie Chung. She had a television show in Los Angeles at that time called Two on the Town. And she'd go out and usually she'd have a celebrity and they'd go about Los Angeles discovering interesting things. So she came to me and we went on the helicopter out to Palm Springs and I showed her where the windmills were going to be built. And at the end of the show, I have a cowboy hat on. I've got a very dark tan because I've been out in the sun all summer. I got the dark. I look like the Marlboro Man. You know the Marlboro Man with this. And the sun's going down over the horizon over there on the top of the mountain. And she asked me in a very quiet voice, she says, "What do you see?" And I just put my arm out and I said, "As far as I can see are windmills in the valley of all sizes, from 1 megawatt up to 3 megawatt, big ones." And sure enough, here we are, 20 some odd years after that interview, and the San Gorgonio Pass is full of windmills and generates multi-megawatts of power every day. So that was my first business, my first entrepreneurial adventure. And then this first interview with Connie Chung, which then led to an interview by the Los Angeles Times. So the Times article even went into greater depth, as you can do in text, in writing. You can tell a longer story sometimes than you can do on television. A guy named Jose Parawoski, who is the former chairman of Westinghouse Argentina, and he was part of the leading junta that took over the government. He was part of that. He was a former general. No, he was a former admiral in the Navy, very powerful down there in Argentina. And I got a call from him saying, "Hello, Mr. Carroll, this is Jose calling you from Buenos Aires. And I have just finished reading your article in the Los Angeles Times, and I must meet you. When would be convenient?" And I said, "Well, when are you back in town? When are you back in the U.S.?" And he said, "If you tell me you can meet me on Monday, I'll be there on Monday. And can you come over to my hotel?" And I said, "Sure. Just tell me where you're staying and I'll meet you over there." So I met him, and he decided to put up $5 million into our venture, which was Wind Energy Unlimited. We changed the corporate structure to take advantage of this new $5 million. At the same time, we changed the name of the company from Wind Energy Unlimited to the California Energy Group. And we moved our offices up to Irvine, which is in Orange County. And we got in the business of actually making windmills. And we hired engineers, and we went to AeroVironment to build the first blades for us, and on and on and on. So I continued on in that wind business, and that's how that ended up. And, I was just trying to, in between some of my ventures, I would go to work. I would actually say, all right, to me, it was like a vacation. Because as you know, Vivek, being an entrepreneur is not an 8-hour-a-day job.
No, it's 24/7.
And that's right. It's 24/7, and so just getting a job working at ITT Employer Services, running their headquarters branch, to me was like a piece of cake. I mean,
right.
At 5 o'clock, go home.
Yeah, and forget about it. That's the key thing, right? Yeah,
I don't have to worry about as a manager, I do have to worry about the budget, but not in the same way. It wasn't my money,
right?
So, but I've done a lot of different ventures, and have been supportive and involved in other people's ventures as a venture consultant, where I actually come in, get involved, either helping them raise the money, or sometimes the board of directors will hire me to sort of watch over the kids.
Right.
You know what I mean? And or help them with planning, or help them with learning how to get along better, which is an issue,
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned How to TV. That was the last venture I did that involved venture capital.
But Rick, how did the idea for How to TV come to you? Because so far you've described how you worked with other startups that were already started, and you were kind of a key employee with them, I guess. But How to TV was your idea. So tell us about the idea and how it came to you.
Well, first off, I knew a lot of TV people in this town. I knew a lot of movie people. And so anybody that has seen a movie set and has looked at the camera setups and so forth, you quickly realize that you're talking some pretty high-tech gear, and so it's really quite an advantage to have access to people who have that skill set. I'm just looking for my timer. I don't know what happened to it. It got lost. And you guys ever had that happen to you on your
sometimes? Sometimes. Well,
so you're asking me, how did I segue into how to?
Well, how did the idea come to you? Because a lot of times, entrepreneurs, they want to start something, but just coming up with an idea is a job.
I'll tell you, sometimes an idea is generated because you look at what are your resources. What do I have available to me? And I realized two things very fast. One, the next thing to be real big on the internet was going to be video. And I even saw the day where it was going to kill network television, which in many ways it's done.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the underlying economics of television industry today, you realize that the bulk of TV is now IP. In other words, when you go on television and you see all these interviews and stuff they're doing on news, they're not coming into the studio anymore. They're interviewing them at their home office. You notice that when they're just like we're doing today. You could go to CNN and I could be sitting at home just like this. And so that's all that content is coming to CNN through the internet. And I could see this. I mean, it was so obvious to me, it was like a no-brainer. That pretty soon you were going to have very high resolution. The only thing that was holding us back in those days was the speed of the internet. The average speed of the internet when I got involved in 1998, the average speed of the internet was 300 baud. Right. You know what 300 baud is?
Yes, of course. I had those dial-up modems myself.
Remember those?
Oh yeah, they couldn't. It took like forever for just one picture to load. Even it would.
Even to print out a text document was laborious, line by line.
Yes,
you remember that, line by line. And then I remember when I saw my first image, my first picture on the internet, which was in 1999. And that actually was sent around the world by Reuters. Mm-hmm. Were the first to do that. And they were, at the time, showcasing a new image compression technology that allowed you to take a big image and make it a small image, lower the cost of their customer service by providing consumers a way to get their questions answered on a video that we would make. So we went out in the automobile industry. We had, the typical cast of characters, Ford, General Motors. Back then there was Chrysler. And then we had Audi, BMW, Mercedes. We had in the Japanese cars, which was a big thing back then. We had Toyota, Nissan. We had the Nissan Maxima, which we did, and a couple others I forget. And we did this stuff where we'd fly in through the rear window and then do a 360 of the inside of the car, and then allowed you to zoom into whatever you wanted to look at. If you wanted to look at the radio, then the whole radio would pop up on the screen. And stuff. And now is the beginning of digital broadcasting and digital stuff, digital audio inside the car, which required a whole new education to people.
Right.
Why you can't use an 8-track in a CD player. That 8-track is old news and CD is a hell of a lot better. Basically is what we're telling them. You could only see a video on the computer in your office.
Right.
Or if you had a laptop computer, you could take it outside. But for us, we were building out studios and we were still using basically television quality camera equipment. And this was before the birth of iPhone, the birth of GoPro, where you could have 1080p quality, 1080i, or even 4K in your hand for under $2,000. I mean, that was like, are you kidding me? Anybody in the industry, if you had told them that that was possible in 2000, would have told you were nuts. And yet, the following year, the iPhone was introduced. And thus, all of the stuff that used to be cluttering up my brain started happening. Because when we were doing the presentations to investors, I would get up with just a pad of paper and tell people, imagine the day when you'll be able to look at something like this and have it available to you wherever you are and have it connected to the rest of the world. So you could be sitting on a beach in Bimini looking at a spreadsheet that was just sent to you by one of your people in New York. And that's the way we work today. And I was describing this to people back in 1999. So that also is the burden of the entrepreneur. The burden of the entrepreneur is to see the future, to be able to explain the bigger picture. So I used to have to start my presentations with, what is the internet? What is the internet? We're having the same discussions today. What is AI? I mean, to the average person who's sitting in an office in a middle management position, they're scared shitless. Because everything they're hearing on television says, hey, dude, your days are numbered. And guess what? They are.
They are, yeah.
As are the people flipping burgers in McDonald's. As are, I mean, I could go on and on and on. Where automation, robotics, because that's the next thing that's going to be coming, that's going to be omnipresent. We'll have robots all over the place. You're already seeing the delivery robots on the street.
Right.
With the little flag and all that. Are you seeing that in Mumbai?
Not much, not yet. But the thing about India is, once it adopts, then it'll adopt a lot very fast. So
Right.
it's usually a little bit behind time-wise. So like America and Europe will adopt things before.
Yeah.
But then when India does, then it'll just adopt it large scale.
Yeah.
And it'll be everywhere.
Yeah. Well, you've got the big one, of course, is Tesla.
Yes.
The
Elon just came up with a statement that he feels that the robots that his companies are going to make are going to be bigger than the Tesla cars, like in terms of revenue.
Oh, yeah, they will be. They will be. They're going to be so damn useful.
Yeah.
Can you just imagine it? You can turn the factory on 24/7, and a lot of oddball mechanical things have to be done between lines, between production lines, where as the car flips around from this line, now it's going onto this line, and on this line, they do everything underneath. They put the tires on, they put the suspension in, they put the shocks, all those junk that goes underneath. And that's where the robot is helpful in setup, So there's just so many things that a robot can be helpful in business.
Absolutely.
Doing repetitive, Elon has this little pitch where he says doing dangerous, repetitive, stupid tasks over and over again, that's where you use a robot. And it'll save you a lot of money, and it will, because your number one expense in most companies is payroll.
Absolutely.
So, maybe I think Elon's talking about having this thing hit the street at less than 50 grand. Yeah. And his target is under 25. So if he can get a robot under 25, do you know housewives are out there that are thinking to themselves, I can't afford a maid, but I can afford
And
whatever
the thing about the robot too is it's a one-time investment. So once you spend your 25 grand, you don't have very much expense
right,
after that. With
right,
humans, it's a yearly expense.
right. And
It's constant.
they're constantly upgrading and upgrading software and giving it new features, and
And they run 24/7. They don't need to sleep or
they run
eat or anything.
right,
No
right.
vacations.
No, and they're perfectly supposedly happy doing that.
Well, I don't think they feel anything happy or sad, but yeah. But
Yeah,
Rick, going back to your how to TV because you were in the middle of that.
yeah,
So you were getting new contracts one after the other and all of that.
yeah.
So tell us
And
about.
we were hiring at a prodigious rate. I mean, we went from our handful of 7 people to 60 employees in under a year. And my projections, based on demand, were that we were going to need in excess of 100,000 square feet of studio space. And I was going to need about 30,000 square feet just in warehousing to take care of all the inbound products that are coming into us and to take care of all the outbound products that we want to get rid of. So there was a lot of expense. I had a $20 million offering on my desk, which would have been our B round. And shit, the first phone call I made, they took $5 million right away. And that was to a VC. And they said, yeah, count us in for 5. And that was my first call. Because everybody had heard about us. They'd heard we had been on television, we'd been on the news, we were even on the first class lounges on Delta. Had us on their television. When you're taxing and stuff, then they'd put How to TV up and do a little thing about an LA company while you're in LA. So we got a lot of press, and but geez, that morning when I got my first call from one of my board of directors saying, "Rick, have you seen what the market's doing?" I said, "No, hang on," and I had everything on the market right on my desk. So I popped up the screen and I looked at it. I go, "Oh my God! All of the IPOs that had happened like in the last year, where these startups had gone from opening price of, let's say, $30 a share, and at the end of the year they're over 300. And this was common. This kind of outrageous valuations where you had companies going from a $10 million valuation to $300 million valuation, but not based on anything.
Right. It was the tech bubble. I was right in the middle of it myself, not as a startup, but as an employee. And
Yeah.
it was wild. It was the whole thing.
Yeah.
The rise as well as the fall, both were just so
And
wild.
the fall was, in one day came the fall.
Right.
And the way it impacted me was 2 ways. One, it was my expectation in the following year that we would be ready if we wanted to, based on earnings. Imagine that. Based on earnings, I would be ready to float a successful IPO.
Wow.
So I'd have a red herring on the street, probably by the third quarter. That was my expectation. Everything in front of me said, our company is really doing well. We're hitting our targets. we're getting a lot of feedback from the entertainment business, from the Scott Welch, who managed Alanis Morissette and Goo Goo Dolls, Green Day, Savage Garden, and lots and lots of movie projects. He had come in with $500,000 originally into How to TV, but and then I put him on my board, and oh my gosh, the wealth of information I got from all of these connections and a fantastic board of directors. Our outlook, if we had been able to get that next round of funding, we would have been great. As a matter of fact, we would have ridden out that storm. If I had had that $20 million in the bank, we could have plowed right through it and gone profitable we probably would have cut off a couple projects that were very capital intensive to give us a bit more run room. But basically, our revenues were strong, and it's just unfortunate that it happened the way it did. But sometimes life goes that way,
Absolutely, yeah. So actually, you partially answered the question I was thinking of was, couldn't you have ridden out the storm somehow? Because it sounded like you had a pretty solid business. And while, granted that there was all this turbulence going on in the market and all of that, I remember very clearly the market fell a lot. But, the thing with these kind of things is they do recover with time. So possibly if you could have just held on, or your investors, board of directors could have kind of done something.
Yeah. Well, there was some, half of our board who are all institutional.
Okay.
They want out. They want to move on.
Right. They have the herd mentality.
Yeah. And they get tax advantages for the losses.
Right.
So they can use these losses to offset gains that they have elsewhere. And that's the way they look at it. And I know it, and it's fine. It's fine. But there was another part of our board, including our then CEO, who very much wanted to continue. I can't have a company that's operating at a quarter of its capacity, just sort of bumping along, saving money by reducing the number of employees, by reducing the amount of office space, by shrinking the company. I can cut my overhead, 2/3 easily.
Right.
And last another 2 years at that rate, right? But I thought it was going to take the market 3 to 5 years to come back. And it did. It did. But, that's life.
Right. Oh, yeah. It's easy to look back on it and see it for what it is, but to see ahead is, predicted what's going to happen and stuff. Yeah. So, how did it sort of all end up with How to TV?
Well, we actually sold the company. We did a merger. That was the technical mechanics of the financial instrument, attracting and holding great talent. Oh, yeah. People want to work for a rocket ship. They don't want to work for a Volkswagen.
Yes.
So if I tell people, we're just hanging on for the next 3 years and waiting for the next ride, people don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
So
that actually leads me very neatly into a question I wanted to ask, which was, while, at one time you had quite a few employees, 60 employees, I think you said. So how can you tell us anything about getting good people? Because, people lie on the interview. It's tough to really judge them at that point. And then when they come in, then you realize, okay, this person's good, this one is not, and you got to. So how did that go for you? Do you have any tips for us about finding and keeping the right, high quality talent, as you were saying?
We did use recruiters
Okay.
for executive talent. And we did use some of the services that were available at that time for technical talent, for high-end technical. I don't even remember. Today they call it Indeed, is one of the companies out there. Yeah. Similar to that. And there were 2 or 3 of them out there that we used like that. But, when you're in your focus on people changes as you move along the cycle. So in the beginning, when you're a founder, and let's say you are the founder and you're the guy with the idea, you're the guy walking around with the light bulb, okay? So you got the light bulb over your head and you're talking to all kinds of people and you're looking at getting maybe some of your buddies that you went to school with to join you in your effort. And guess how much they're going to get paid?
Not much. That's how it is with startups.
That's how it is.
Well, Rick, the reason I asked this question...
No. That's not fair, because we keep track of all of that.
Right.
So you will sign, if you're a smart entrepreneur, even when the founders start getting together, you have a founders agreement. You actually have a legal document that's the founders agreement, and it stipulates all kinds of stuff, including you can't sell your stock. So don't try.
Right.
There's no market for your stock. Someday, if we do a lot of things right, there will be a market for your stock. And at that point, we will give you instructions on how you can sell your stock. But that's somewhere down the road. We also cover in great detail, even early on, how much stock they're going to own. Now, as an example, I controlled, at the height of our market, when the business was just humming, we were getting lots of press, we had tons of new accounts opening up, things were looking good. We had another deal ready in the hopper to finance the company. Wonderful CFO, just totally on the ball. Already had negotiated a $1 million line of credit with Silicon Valley Bank, so we had that in the till. We were operating smartly, but despite all of that, all your best intentions and all your best efforts, sometimes the market does something,
right?
Or there's civil disorder, or a war starts, or who knows.
Like the recent pandemic, that disrupted so much.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
So much. It affected my startup hugely as well.
Example, however, here's a great example of entrepreneurs taking advantage of a horrible situation.
Yes.
So here you got the Europeans and the Americans sending billions of dollars and billions of euros into who the hell was fighting?
Ukraine.
I forgot.
Ukraine.
And to stop the Russian advance and so forth. Well, you got some smart operators inside Ukraine who now are building some of the most advanced military drones better than what the Americans got. I mean, they're building stuff based upon what they learned last week. they found out that if their bird comes in at a certain angle, at a certain height, whatever, a certain speed, they can see him. But if they do this, if they change their tactic just a little bit, they can't see him until it's too late.
Right. Okay.
And then they update the software. So the software says, oh, they're firing at us right here, immediately drop to this altitude and hide behind this tree and do, whatever.
Right.
And so that's an example of, even in the worst environment, you got some people there who are saying, hey, I know people who know how to assemble electronics, who have a good mind, used to do that as a kid. We used to build little projects, build our first crystal radio, that kind of stuff, and gather these people up and build a prototype, take it over to the Army. The Army, if they like it, they'll buy it right away. There's no long, you're not going through multiple rounds of authorizations. If it works and it does the job, they'll say, we need 500 of them yesterday. So there's all kinds of opportunities. And as a matter of fact, there's U.S. drone maker in Southern California that are making some of the best drones that are being used in Ukraine in the same way. It's just a U.S. company doing it,
So, Rick, talking about, adjusting to the situation, you're definitely a quick thinker on your feet. Tell us about some stories. I know there's some stories about how you did some imaginative funding approach, and then some marketing at an event with an elephant, I think. Tell us about those.
You're talking about the big venture capital companies get tons and tons of business plans sent to them, usually by special delivery or courier or whatever. They think they'll get some advantage because the courier delivers it. It's going to end up in the same trash can.
Right.
They just don't have time to go through those. They just don't. Most of the business that they do comes from other people in the business. So it's the term they use for that. It comes over the transom. Like somebody threw it over the back of the boat, which is the transom, is the back of the boat. So, I'm just trying to think. So we were just talking about funding right there in the. Go ahead.
Oh, I think you went to this major venture capital firm. You managed to sneak in.
I'm describing the problem that everybody runs into. How do you get a top partner? Because you need a partner to look at it. If it's not a partner who looks at it, it's useless. So I thought, I'm in this meeting, which I used to do all the time. I pop into meetings. So I just sit down and I'm listening, and they're all talking about different ways they're thinking about getting the business plan into the office. And they had some pretty clever ways of doing that. The problem is, as long as it's this size, as long as it's like this big, it still fits neatly into that trash can. So, just because you got some delivery guy to walk it in doesn't mean it's going to find a less glorious end, So I said, you actually have to tie what we're doing all together. You have to make our business plan be the instructions for assembling that bookcase we just gave them. So we're going to give them a bookcase that stands 6 feet tall. and weighs about 100 pounds. And it's going to take two guys to deliver it. And we're just going to kind of lean it against the wall. So when we show up at XYZ Venture Capital Company and we say, hey, we're with XYZ Furniture Company, we got a delivery for a Mr. blah, blah, blah. Well, he's not here right now. Why don't you just put it in his office? Perfect. Because then in a see-through plastic enclosure, this thing was bright orange, and it said instructions here in black on orange. You couldn't miss it. You could see it from 40 feet away. And then when you pulled that thing out, it had a CD, which you plug into your computer, which shows you how to put together the bookcase, which is what our company's all about. So, the absolute ideal situation would be where the CEO would say, yeah, I can use that bookcase right over here. I've been looking for one. Great. Okay, let's put it together. And he gets to see how this works. And we actually had a couple guys who did that. Actually had their assistant come in and they got down on the floor and they put the whole thing together and they did find it extremely helpful, So that was the one that was picked up by, I can't remember which newspaper ran that.
San Jose Mercury News.
Yeah, it was the Mercury News. They picked it up. And then, of course, we got a bunch of other VC calls from that. And the New York Times followed it. And then I think Inc. magazine followed that. So it keeps going for a while,
How much total funding did you get from this imaginative way of delivering the idea?
Oh, that amounted in about 8.9 million.
8.9 million. Wow.
Yeah, the total rate with friends and family was right around 10. Yeah.
Wow. No, but that just goes to show just a little bit of imaginative thinking. And instead of getting $0 of funding, now you got 9 million, basically.
Yeah.
Funding.
Yeah.
And that's the lesson is, you got to think outside the box. You got to be imaginative.
Yeah.
Not just with your startup idea, but how you deliver it, how you market it, how you pitch it, how you get your way to the important people.
Yeah, I think particularly even more so today, your founders team is. If you got a great founders team, the money will show up. Yeah. So you've got the people with the great credentials. Like if you're talking about doing an AI startup, oh boy, it's tough to get a good AI person today. They're probably already working on something.
Right. At Google or wherever.
Yeah.
So it's hard to pull them out of that because they're getting a good pay.
It doesn't mean that, like, I've got a ton of ideas for AI.
Okay.
And I may just...
Right.
I think I used my first AI effort is actually going to be behind Firestop.
Nice.
I'll use it in Firestop. The consumer won't necessarily know it, but it'll be doing a lot of the work.
Now, Rick, on another interesting story, fascinating story is I think you were at an exposition somewhere, and then they changed things on you, and then you did something pretty imaginative with an elephant.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about that one.
Oh, yeah. I was VP marketing for a company, International Trade and Marketing. And our company provided consulting services basically to industry to help those businesses know where they could find new business, particularly in the developing world, through projects that were funded by the likes of the World Bank, the Exim Bank, the major global development banks. And we would help them by submitting reports to them, monthly reports that would match their SIC codes and their TUSA codes to what those projects were calling for, maybe not for another 5 years. It wouldn't even be on their radar for quite a while. But General Electric makes these gigantic water turbines to produce electricity from flowing water. And they may have no awareness that there's a project in, maybe it's in India, a development project where they're putting in a big hydro setup. And so that's what that business did. We would tell General Electric, hey, these guys need a whatever kind of big pump, and we'd put them together. So we were sent down to the New Orleans World's Fair, which was the first World's Fair in many years. So it was a big deal, and it got a lot of hype. And of course, it was really more focused on the consumer. But they did build a big business center, and they put a lot of hype behind that too. With all of the support services and the media and the blah-de-dee-da-da. So I bit, and I brought a big crew down there with a big, expensive display, and realized on day one, boy, this is great, fantastic facility, but no people. They had lasers and big silver towers and all kinds of stuff. And a rotating logo, that was 30 feet wide. And, it was kind of an impressive looking thing. But we did very well. Within a couple of days, I was seated with the governor of the state and several other of the top business execs who were CEOs of other companies in town, took me to lunch. So, and I had offers to take me out of my company and do something else. People, they actually wanted me to take over marketing for the whole event down there.
Wow.
I just saw them. I of course couldn't do that. I just couldn't. But so that's how that went. And it's sometimes, and I think some of this I got from the Marines, but sometimes it's just so damn bad that everybody looks at it in the same way. The only thing they can see is the disaster. They can't see the opportunity. But believe it or not, sometimes disasters create amazing opportunities, like the building that has to go on after the disaster. Or in the case of, arriving and spending, thousands and thousands of dollars to come down to this big event, expecting you're going to make some big connections and high-level executive connections, and to find the place is empty, that's a disaster. If I had to go back to my company and say, oh, yeah, I spent about $40,000 and we had a nice vacation down in New Orleans for a couple of weeks, but no business. Sorry about that, boys. I probably wouldn't be working for long.
Although it wasn't really your fault because the event organizers didn't market it properly, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The promises that they made and the telephone hype was the worst.
Right.
Because, he pumped it up, like this place is swarming, So
right.
I was excited about it.
No, but I knew. That just shows, again, an example, viewers, of how Rick just thought on his feet and made, a bad situation work, and using imaginative ideas and techniques. And ended up with great results. Met the governor.
And, yeah, and you can develop that in your people, that mindset. Sometimes it takes a while to get people to think that way and to realize that stop thinking about the problem and start thinking about the solution. Think about the opportunities. Other people are having this very same problem you're having right this minute. Now, would they pay you something to solve this problem for them? Yeah, probably. Maybe. A whole new customer. Never expected. Look at that. Got a whole new customer. There's other people having the same problem we're having right now. Jeez. Let's sell them. How much is it worth?
Absolutely.
Some problems are very expensive to solve, requiring lots of engineering or lots of specialized people to put their heads together. And now here we have AI coming along, and geez, I mean, if you can't make $1 million today, then forget it. Because AI is the fastest way to it, in my opinion. But I'm working on another startup right now called Firestop.
Tell us about it.
You're seeing this problem globally, particularly in the Southern Hemisphere. You're seeing it down in Australia and New Zealand, these tremendous wildfires in the outback that just are ferocious. And when they come through a town, they just decimate it. They just start from one end of the city and go right to the other end, and it's gone. So, and we're having that same problem here in North America. Many parts of the country that never had burned or, would burn every 100 years, something like that, like down in the Everglades in Florida. They have, lightning strikes that cause fires that usually will burn out relatively quickly, or it's followed by a rain cycle that just puts it out. But now with global warming, the Everglades is drying up. So we're seeing fires occur in places where they historically have been rather scarce. And we're also seeing something which we refer to as conflagration, which is basically where you have fire in a city environment where the residential units are close enough together that the fire from one will lead the one next to it to start burning, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And that they call a conflagration. And that's basically, if a wildfire, we think of it's a wildfire, it's trees burning, it's brush burning, it's wild stuff burning, stuff you find out in the woods, But now you're finding that in certain temperature and humidity environment where the humidity is very low and the temperature is very high for multiple days at a time, this is where you can have these conflagrations start. Because when you get wind that's blowing better than 30 miles an hour, a spark from a house over here can easily travel a couple hundred yards and get in the next guy's yard very easily. So anyway, looking at all of that, I realized that one of the problems that we have is pulling together all this disparate information around the country about what's burning where and how bad is it, and getting it in one place. So you have every state has their big website. Most county governments have their big wildfire website. A lot of cities have their fire website. So what we do is we go out and comb those and pull that data together, including the federal data, which gives us the satellite feed, so we can see what's the most recent satellite information telling us about new fire starts and so forth. And that's what I'm working on right now. So the idea would be have one place, Firestop, that you would go to where you'll find easy access to all of this information. And because it's aggregated from all over the country and ultimately from all around the world, it also gives you a statistical reference to then begin making predictions about the future. When you control that much data, if you think of it in terms of educating your AI model by bringing all this information together, it then can become much more helpful as a predictor and as a way to learn better ways to fight fires to begin with.
Sounds like you could use it to prevent the fire from starting in the first place.
Exactly.
What's
Ultimately,
the revenue model on this? Will it be?
Well, yeah, it's going to be ad driven. It'll be mostly sponsorship driven, where because some of the equipment that a fire, let's just say, if a company comes to me that makes the air apparatus that the firefighters wear that gives them oxygen when they're going in, it puts oxygen into their helmet so they can breathe and they're not breathing smoke and all that. So somebody comes to me and wants to showcase their product on Firestop. So I'm going to maybe give them a page and say, this is the XYZ company showcasing their new whatever product it is.
Right.
But I'll make sure that those are all related to what we're doing.
Right.
So they're directly related. So they'll be useful.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Connected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Rick, we've gone well over time, but there's just so much useful information. Do you have any advice to give to budding entrepreneurs, people who are starting or thinking of starting a startup?
Oh my God, I could go for hours. Your founders team is your number one project. Getting a great founders team. You can have a marginal idea and a great founders team, and it'll be funded. You can have a super great idea and a marginal founders team, and it will not get funded. So put your effort into getting the best team you can, and that's, I think, the best advice I could give you right at the moment. And don't give up.
Right. And yeah, I can attest to that because so many challenges come along the way, and you just can't give up. You just gotta keep marching on.
Right. Keep plowing. If you have to, take a break, turn the light off, lay down for a few hours. Like I put on the headphones and crank up the Dark Side of the Moon for a while, get my head on something else, and then come back to it.
Yeah.
But I've enjoyed being part of this, and I wish you well, Vivek, with this project.
Thank you, Rick. Yeah. And so everyone, more information about Rick and his startup is down in the description below. So definitely check it out. And I'm sure we'll hear great things about Rick's startup and, possibly have a second podcast with him discussing about how, this Firestop is this huge success. and more stories, more fun stories from Rick. So thank you so much, Rick, for taking the time out and coming here and speaking with us. And, best of luck with Firestop.
Thank you so much, Vivek, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.